Hi, and thanks so much for being here today on the SJ Child Show. Welcome to the SJ Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Today, I have a great new guest. I'm anticipating a wonderful conversation, and I know that we both have some things in common, which we'll get to and find out as we learn more about him and his story. Clint Hatton, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. And I forgot to ask you, do you just go by SJ? Does everybody call you SJ? Or?
SJ, Sarah Jean. So if you want to go south, but yeah, either way you want to go, it's you're welcome to do. It was a pen name for starting to write children's books, and all the good authors have those initial names, so I went that route.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I'm going to choose Sarah just to choose something, and then we'll go with that.
I love it. No, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to learn more about you. So let's start at the beginning. Give us an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll just go to where I'm at today, because my story is pretty layered when you start talking about going back to my childhood. If you want to go there, we can go there later if you choose. But where I am today, I live here in Dallas, Texas, a little city called McKinney. And I like to say it this way: I am a deliriously happily married man. I always have to slow down because it's such a tongue twister. But we'll have been married 20 years in April. So very, very blessed for that. And then, yeah, thank you. And then 3 boys, one who has already preceded us in heaven, which I'm sure we'll talk about here after a bit. And then the others are 18 and 13. So they're my pride and joy. And so what I do here is I was a pastor for about 17 years, up until the beginning of this year. And I've been slowly moving towards being exclusively in the personal development space and speaking. And I also am planning on having my own podcast here this year as well, that I'm excited about doing. So just kind of a new season of my life. Yeah. Doing some of the same things, I've coached and mentored people for the better part of 20 years, but that was, it was always within a church, which is great. And I still think is an amazing thing for people to do. But I just, for many years, had wanted to kind of branch outside of just my small little 4 walls and meet different people and meet people that are outside of my community and help people on a broader scale. So that's in short, what I love the most, my family, and kind of what I do to make ends meet.
And you're an author, right? I saw that you have a book as well.
That's exactly right.
We'll touch on that too. Well, it's great to meet you and to, share stories that can be so life-changing and anecdotal for people all over, when they just feel like they might be isolated in a situation, just to hear those words and think, wow, somebody else is going through what I'm going through, or has gone through what I'm going through. And me personally, in the neurodiverse autism community, one thing that I love to give advice to families is to do something just like that. You have a family behind where you're at that is just getting their new diagnosis, that you can help support. A family that's going through the same things as you are at this time, the same age children, so you can lean on for the, oh my gosh, what's happening right now. And then people in your future that have already gone through this process, that are already into the transition process, and what you can gain from them. And it's so valuable to build those types of communities in all genres and areas and interests and things. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about how you started to build those communities.
Well, especially, what I'm doing now with the personal development and the writing of the book, it's tied to the most difficult part of our story. And that is simply, 3 years ago, actually, I guess it's been closer to 3.5 years ago now, our lives were turned upside down in an instant. My oldest son, Gabriel, who at that time was about 3 months shy of his 18th birthday, He was, as parents, we think all of our kids are extraordinary, right? So they're all extraordinary in their own ways. And he was a go-getter, very passionate about life, very adventurous. I like to say, everybody loves t-shirts now. I mean, I'm wearing my Big Bold Brave shirt now, but people like to
Nice.
wear shirts with sayings, right? It's
Yeah.
like a big thing. His would have been what's next, because that's just how he always was. He would accomplish something that's like for me, I'd be like, celebrate it. But he's already like, all right, what's next?
Yeah.
So that was just kind of how he was. And so, 8 years old, I'll go quickly for your listeners. 8 years old, he went up with his Uncle Danny in a small aircraft and got the bug. And it never left him. He wanted to become a pilot. And so by the time he was a freshman in high school, he got an opportunity to go through a 4-year aviation educational program that our school
Wow.
district just happens to have. Yeah, which is not typical. There's not a lot of them, at least today, that are, around the country. And then on top of that, more to the point of him being able to actually physically live out his dream of flying, he joined a club called Tango 31 Aero Club, which is at a little airport, a municipal airport, maybe 5 to 10 minutes from our house. And through that club, actually began to have the opportunity to learn everything there was about flying, including maintenance on aircraft. And they
Wow.
painted planes, they did oil changes, they fixed parts and electrical things and wiring. And the founder of that club, his name is Kevin Lacey, taught the kids everything you can think of
Wow.
involving aviation. And so very fortunate to be a part of that. And so through that, with that sweat equity, because that's how the kids paid their way, they only paid $50 a year for this club. I mean, it was nothing.
Wow.
But when they proved themselves through sweat equity, they were allowed to start flying. And so he started flying with a flight instructor, of course, who all, by the way, donated their time. So just another amazing thing about that. And ultimately, at the age of 16, before he even or before he had his driver's license, he soloed an aircraft, which was we were both there. My wife and I were both there when he went up for the first time. And it's an experience, to see your
Oh,
kid who doesn't even drive your car yet jump in a plane without anybody and go off. It was rewarding and scary as all get out all at the same time. But anyway, so he was chasing his dream. And at 17, that's the youngest you can be to actually get your actual pilot's license. And he studied, passed the exam the first time, which is not necessarily typical either. And did his check ride and the flight and just aced it. And he became a licensed pilot. He was living his dream.
wow.
But then ultimately on September 23rd of 2019, he was taking a friend home, actually. The University of Arkansas is a few hours north of us. So he flew her back so she could get back to school quicker. And he needed the hours. It's all about hours with pilots that are at that stage. And on the way back, he hit an unexpected weather system. It was night flying, which he needed to do. It was part of his training. And he ended up suffering from spatial disorientation, which is when a pilot loses their horizon. Basically, it can happen to even the most gifted pilots. Kobe Bryant's pilot, most people are aware of
Yeah.
his crash. That's exactly what happened with him. And so he crashed and he lost his life chasing his dream, living his dream, really. And so, how that played out as a family is, as you can imagine, it's an incredibly devastating blow. The pain that you go through and continue to, it's only been 3.5 years. I don't expect to ever get past the pain because I don't even want to. It's not even a goal. He's my son. That pain's there because of the love we share.
Right.
But it started us, Sarah, obviously there's a lot to our story involving this, but it started us on kind of a new journey that just got us thinking, gosh. And I think death can do that, when you're surrounded by a death. It can cause you to go into a hole and kind of want to disappear.
Yeah.
But it can also cause you to really think about life more preciously and how intentional that you need to be, because nobody's promised tomorrow, right? We all know that
Yeah.
cognitively, but to actually live that way is kind of a different thing. And
Not taking
so
it for granted.
not
Yeah.
taking it for granted. Yeah. And so, obviously there's a lot involved with the way we grieved as a family and, what we went through in that first year or two in particular. But ultimately, it led to, I knew I needed to, you've seen Big Bold Brave. I'm sure we're going to talk about that here in a second. That's how he lived his life. That's where that phrase came from, that he lived big, bold, and brave. And I recognized for me that there were pockets of my life that I use this word for myself, and even in the book that I called myself a coward, because I had wanted to branch out in the personal development space for many years and just didn't have the courage to do it. I, had wanted to write a book for many years. Didn't obviously have any clue that it was going to include this part of our story, but I just didn't, and so he just inspired me, even though you always, as a parent, want the roles to be completely reversed. And I'd rather have lived to a very old age and inspired my younger son to grow into maturity and pass the baton and all those things. Our script didn't go that way, and it was flipped. And so that's why I ended up writing the book. I wanted to help a lot of people. That's why I launched this company, because this is my version of living like he did, big, bold, and brave. And ultimately, that's what I want to encourage your listeners, no matter what we get into today. I believe everybody was born to be courageous. I really do. As a matter of fact, I believe everybody was born with courage. I believe everybody was born with a creative genius. And I believe everybody was born to be compassionate. And I think when you learn to combine those three things, you really can change the world around you. And that's ultimately my motive.
I love that. And I agree with you 100%. And moving through types of grief and really being vulnerable and sharing your story. Number one, thank you so much. And, on behalf of me and all the listeners, we're so sorry that you had to go through this grief, with the lessons and love and compassion you can show. And like you said, show to not take things for granted. Take one day at a time. And I love to make connections. And so in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait till we talk afterwards so I can like tell you these friends I'm going to connect you with. And, just these things that are just like these moments where you really learn how you can lift others around you through your experiences. So excuse me for getting a little tender on the heart here. No, thank you so much. And taking those steps and realizing the inspiration that you are getting from your child. I haven't lost a child, and I have a nonverbal child who inspires me.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of a different type of appreciation as well.
Sure.
And so I can understand like that depth of that, where those inspirations come from, sometimes through our children. And like you said, you aspire to be someone they look up to. And then every day you're like, how did they teach me so much?
Yeah, right.
Who was I before these kids anyways?
Yeah. I've been asked actually quite a few times in some of the other interviews that I've done, I was like, well, do you think, because there's a lot of my story, obviously for sake of time, we can't get into, this isn't a life story. This isn't a life story podcast, right? But, did you think that, because of the way you were as a parent and the things that you went through, and that you really set your son up to really be that way? And every time I'm like, well, maybe a little, because, the reality is I feel like there's something in all of us. There's something unique in all of us that maybe DNA plays into it on some level, but at the end of the day, there's just something. And, I'm a person of faith. I believe, in God. I believe God put that in all of us, So when I think of his story, or my other two sons now, I'm so excited for their lives, and I certainly encourage them to dream big and all those things. But at the end of the day, we need to recognize there's something special and unique in all of our children and in all of humanity.
Yeah. And the more we can do that, I love to, when I'm teaching about, my special needs books in elementary schools and things, one of our favorite quotes is, a little bit of knowledge turns fear into understanding. And that can be the case for all types of situations, for grief, for learning how to cope with, unhealthy family situations, and all types of, different areas that you can just provide a little bit of knowledge to, especially children, and they really can open-mindedly see it for what it is, without judgment, without preconceived notions, and really give a fair shot to those types of ideas and things. So there's so much to be said for providing the right type of knowledge to our children.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
They're capable of much more than a lot of times I think we want to give them credit for. I think if I could, let me share just a little part of our early
Please.
process because I think it was something that speaks to what we're talking about in terms of, even in the case of a tragedy, so I'm sitting on the couch the morning, literally the morning after. It was a very long night, very long story of just how information kind of trickled in until we
Yeah.
knew Gabriel was gone. And so the boys didn't come out until about 7:30 in the morning. And as I sat with them, I looked at them and I said, listen, and this came from life experience of helping people for so many years that have went through something similar and seeing where it can go. A
Yeah.
marriage can implode, a family can kind of fall apart. I said, I see this, that we have two choices, guys. We can choose to focus on his death. To me, that's a death mentality. And what I meant by that is if we focus solely on the tragedy of it, that he, died in a horrific plane crash, that all the birthdays and milestones and all the things we're going to miss, and we're going to experience those moments. But if that's our focal point, then our pain is going to keep us trapped. It's going to keep us trapped, and we're going to be shells of who we were created to be. So there's a second choice. The second choice is life. We're going to choose life. And what that meant for us specifically was, I already described to you kind of his personality and his, attack life mentality. I felt like, and they agreed, that that's the only way we could honor his life really, is not to stay in misery and not live our lives fully because of the pain of losing him, but rather just the opposite, to live the way he lived,
Mm.
whatever that looked like for each of us, because we have different gifts, different talents.
Yeah.
So that was part one. Part two was with the grieving process. Again, I had experience with helping people on the other side of it. Now, I'll say this quickly. I do feel like some of that was an advantage in terms of knowing some types of things we need to be careful to look out for. It was not an advantage for the degree of pain. Nothing prepares you for that. So I turned to them and I said, listen, we don't know what this is going to look like as a family, how we're going to grieve from day to day, week to week, probably hour to hour at times. And so we may be angry, we may be sad, we may want to cry, we may want to laugh. There's times where we have a memory what makes us laugh. All of those are totally okay.
Mm.
And you need to know, and this is where I want to go, you need to know that this is a rule for all four of us. This isn't us dictating to you that this is what we need you to do. And if you're hurt, you're sad, you're wanting to cry, you're angry, that you come to us and you feel it and you talk it through. But we're going to hide everything behind closed doors. And especially as the dad, I need to be the leader. I'm just going to man it up. And you're never going to know when I'm in pain because I'm just going to put on a face. That's just not what I knew was going to be healthy. And we weren't going to live it out that way. So we gave each other permission to feel throughout and throughout the years.
Yeah.
Not that morning, not a month later, because every birthday, every milestone, there's lots of things that can bring back certain types of emotions and will.
Yeah.
So, but we brought them into that journey, Sarah. And, have we been perfect? No, not even close. We've had tough times and days where we didn't, live by those values as strongly as we wanted to. And so we've had to recalibrate and, okay, remember, we're going to live big, bold, brave. Remember, we're going to talk these things out. Don't hold it. Don't let yourself get isolated, but they participated in that and they have. And so even though they've been through some pretty rough times with their own emotions, they've still been able to keep pointing in the direction of living their lives
Yeah.
and living them in a way that not only brings them great joy, but hopefully inspires others. And for us, honors his brother.
Yeah. I love that. I saw your tattoo on your arm, the arrows or whatever. It just reminded me of my husband is the analogy king. He has analogies for everything. And we have, I have a stepdaughter that's 23, a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So very similar in age
Yeah.
groups. And one thing when our daughter was off doing her own thing and no longer was in contact with us and things. And one thing my husband had said to kind of just bring the peace, I guess, to our hearts once again was that as parents, we are like the bow. and we
Mm.
could be the most crafted bow, and so much time and effort and all of this work, and so much work can be put into the craftsmanship of the arrow, and how much time you spent building and making it so beautiful. But once that bow and the arrow come together and that arrow is shot into the world, anything can change the trajectory of that arrow. And it's not on the bow. It's not the bow's responsibility at that point. It is what it is, right? And
Yeah.
that's those
Yeah.
arrows land where they are meant to land. So
Yeah. That's good. I like that.
yeah, it just really like brought that to me when I when I saw that. And I think it's so true that we and now being able to parent, 10 years apart and in ages has brought me to a much different avenue and journey of parenting than the
Right.
first
Yeah.
time around when I was coming from my own perspective of parenting. And so it's so beautiful now to, like you said, take each individual for the special, unique challenges, support, but also gifts that they have, and
Yeah.
building on their strengths and showing them through those strengths and showing them in the challenging times. Like, I think the best thing we can do as parents, like you were saying, is be the example of how to come out of these things. They're
Yeah.
going to go into them. We're all human. We're all going to go into some situations that are bad, or we look bad, or we've made a bad decision. But how are we getting out? And how are our children perceiving how we are handling those situations?
Yeah. That made me think of something I think fits really well with this part of the conversation. So we're going to go back to that morning on the couch, but after what we just discussed. And then what we really felt strongly, again, keeping in mind that they were 9 and 14. So Liam, I think, was in fourth grade at that time, and Joel was a freshman in high school. We allowed them to make the decision on what they wanted to do that day. Because that's one of the stark, crazy things about suffering a personal tragedy is your world stops spinning in one regard, but it's still Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world is still moving on, right? And so we had a decision to make. And so look, with Joel, we've had this discussion now of the phrase big, bold, brave didn't exist yet. So that's another thing. And if we get to that, great. If we don't, that's fine. But we had made the commitment to live like Gabriel. And so I asked him, what do you want to do? Now, for him, at that stage in his life, he was a football player. And it just so happened that this is a Tuesday. The next day was the freshman homecoming football game.
Oh.
And so I said, you need to know you can make this decision and you can miss this entire week or longer if necessary. You don't have to go back to school. We can wait. If you want to go back, you can. We're going to make that, or we'll make that decision together. And he didn't even hesitate. He looked at us and he said, I'm going to go to school today because I am going to play in that game tomorrow. I'm going to play for my brother. Sorry.
I love that.
And so, he had this immediate gut reaction to his version of, I'm going to live that way starting today,
Yeah.
and it was not almost, it was storybook, storybook, really, Sarah. The next day, of course, we're in the midst of incredible grief and, the physical side of that, the emotional side of that, all that stuff. But we found ourselves walking into this stadium. He plays at a 6A Texas high school. The only reason that's relevant is because it's a big school. But typically at a freshman game, you only have about, even at that level, 30 people. I mean, hardly anybody goes. Well, word had gotten out to some of Joel's friends and also to some of Gabriel's friends that he was going to play for his brother. So there was, 100 extra people at this game, which was kind of a big deal, in that moment.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, I'm sitting there looking around the stands and, I'm having a hard time just to hold myself together, period, because Gabriel just passed less than 48 hours before. Should we even be here? Did I let him make the right decision? What if he has a bad game? All the just stuff. And he was a player. He was a running back and he was very capable of making big plays, but I just didn't know what was going to happen. So we're sitting there and the offense gets the ball, and the first few plays he didn't go in. I still this day have never bothered to ask. I don't know if that was the coach's grand plan kind of just let him be on the sideline for a few minutes or whatever, but he did. And he puts him in. And on the very first play, he gets a pitch to the right side. Looks like there's no way he's going to be able to turn the corner because they've got pursuit. And somehow he kicks into another gear and runs on a 40-yard touchdown on his first carry.
Oh my
And
God.
everybody goes nuts. I'm crying. She's crying. Everybody's going crazy. And he went on to have a spectacular game. The reason why that's important, football, does it matter? Yeah. Not in the grand scheme of life, but it was his expression
Carried him on
of how he was going to start pushing through now. And so it was amazing. And then for my, youngest, different, but similar, he had just started martial arts, maybe several months before. And we told him, this is something you want to do. You need to stick with it. And so a few years down the road, takes time, but he's now a black belt. He got his black belt at 12 years old and is moving towards his second degree now. And, and that's just for both of them, that's just a part of the expression. Joel's 18 now and going to school and may not play football anymore. He's got business pursuits. But I think to your point, it's just seeing that in your kids and encouraging them to, have a responsibility and a commitment to themselves to do things that steer them in the direction of living the kind of life they want to live. And then us just kind of creating the bumpers on the alley, the bowling alley, right? To totally keep them from getting in the gutter, right?
I love that. And no, I think that's beautiful. And tell us, how has it been for them once you decided we're going to write this book about our situation or our story? How did that come about, and are they involved with it, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, they were first off when I, made the decision to write the book. They were just like, wow, that's really cool. I think of their dad being an author. They just thought it was cool. And then, once I started writing it, of course, they're like, wow, you're writing a book. You're actually writing a book. And then by the time, it came out to where we got the first one and I'm holding it up, there it is. So they both have been really proud of me, if I could say it that way, that I followed through on that, and that I'm helping people, and they're hearing a lot of the stories about it. Now, to be very candid with you, neither one of them have read it yet. And I've told them, in their own time, exactly, that they can read it, because, I think it's important for your listeners to know this, because I'm sure we're going to mention where they can go get it at some point, but it's not a grieving book. I mean, the book is not just a grief book. So, I think when people think of someone who wrote a book for grieving, they're expecting the whole thing to be about that. And that is not why I wrote this book. Now, it's going to contain some really critical things, including some I just shared with you, that I think we have done that have been very healthy in the grief process. But it's much broader than that, because it's really about not allowing, the loss and tragedies of life, or fear, or being afraid to risk and do something that you've always dreamed of, but you're afraid you're going to fail, of truly being intentional about how you really want to live your life. And then for us, that's really important, that's integrated in the book as well, is living by a certain set of standards and values as well, of the way you treat people and the way you are kind to people and, inspiring people and, and those types of things. So I think, they're really proud, and they've been excited, and they've listened to a little bit of a couple of the podcast interviews I've done, which is probably more that generation, right? They'd rather watch and listen than read a book, right? But that they'll both read it in time, and I'll look forward to hearing, how they process it.
Absolutely. Oh no, I'm excited too. I hope that, all of our listeners have a chance to go and check it out. We'll make sure to have in the show notes, but definitely tell us where we can go get the book and where we can find it, if you have a website also.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's two things I'll give you guys, and we can make sure they're in the show notes. Especially for those who are listening that are here in the United States, it's just easy to go to the website, which is BigBoldBrave.us. And yes, I know there's some sticklers already correcting me. It's .us. I get it. But I chose that domain on purpose, because to me, our life is a collaboration, and so I chose us because I felt like that fit. So BigBoldBrave.us, and they can They can find the book there if they'd like to buy the book. They can find, about my speaking engagements and coaching and all those things. All the social media links are on there. So it's just easy. But we probably also have some international listeners as well. And for them, it's just much easier for them to go to Amazon or whatever their preferred online retailer is. It's available everywhere books are sold. I do want to encourage one thing, for those who really want to help me, if you buy it on Amazon, one of the things as an author, I'm sure you already know this too, is getting reviews on your book can be really challenging. Even though it takes probably 2 minutes to do one, I've done a lot of them for other authors, actually. It's just hard to get done. So I would love if your listeners, if they decide to, get the book through Amazon and read it, please consider writing a review. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
But you can also subscribe to a newsletter that I'm getting ready to start actually this week. It's only going to be once a week. I don't like clutter. So it's just going to have some helpful tools, just free tools and some other things I think they'll find is fun and just what's next for Big Bold Brave.
Oh, I love that. That sounds fantastic. And I really look forward to staying in contact. I hope that we can stay in touch and check back in and, find out what's going to be new on the horizon. And hopefully, the spring weather will be starting sooner than later and
no kidding.
get some sunshine back on our faces. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show
For
today,
me
Clint.
too.
Thank you so much for your time and your story. And like I said, I look forward to connecting on social media and staying in touch with you.
Yeah, I as well. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been a real
You.
pleasure. You're so sweet. It's fun to sit
Thank
and
you.
have a talk with you.
I appreciate that. And I'd love to have you back in the future if, things come up and you do anything new or maybe, we just get more into depth and into some of the discussion that we had today. So love to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.